Mets offseason's going to look pretty chaotic. They have 11 players hitting free agency, 10 of which were on the postseason roster. Today, we're going to be telling you our top 5 players that were unlikely to return for the 2025 season.
Not the guys that we don't want to return, but guys that we don't see returning. That's going to be a big difference here because some of these guys we definitely want to come back to the Mets, but it's just hard to really squint and see them on this roster next year, depending on how we think they're going to go about free agency.
Yes. Do we want to start off with some honorable mentions or we throw those at the end?
Honorable mentions at the end for sure.
Okay,
we're going to start off with the big
mentions
stuff.
at the end. Starting off with the big stuff. Number one guy not returning this offseason. I think we got to start with Sean Manaea. I know a lot of people want him back. Us too. I'd love to have Sean Manaea back. Jim Bowden projected him 3 years, $70 million. I don't really know if there's any truth to that. I don't know if Jim Bowden's really been accurate. I know he's not a front office exec anymore, but that's the number that's being thrown around right now. That's more realistic, but it feels like Sean Manaea is probably going to get paid this offseason, probably going to be looking for 4 to 5 seasons. I just don't really see how it makes as much sense as possible for the Mets to match that with all the other free agents available right now.
And just with the fact that this Mets team has a lot of pitchers to replace similar to last offseason. So it's more about going out and getting the next Sean Manaea, the next guy who you pay $13 million for 1 year and winds up getting in the range of $100 million a year after that. The guy that you can make the adjustments, help rehabilitate, turn into like a actual starting pitcher who you thought coming into the year was more of a mid-rotation back end. And again, this isn't anything about Sean Manaea. I think if that 3 for $70 is true, I would highly consider that to bring back Sean Manaea. It's a fair deal. It's a good deal, but I think they're going to be priced out if he goes to the 4 years, possibly even the 5-year kind of range. I don't know about the 5-year range, but I think Sean Manaea can pretty comfortably find himself in that 4-year range. Like Eduardo Rodriguez last year, he didn't get the 4-year range. He got to 2, but there's not. I don't know. There's a lot of pitchers free agent right now, but I think Manaea might weirdly have one of the highest ceilings. I think someone's going to pay up for him.
Yeah, and I just don't think it's going to be the Mets, especially with all the other arms that we need to fill, like you said, and all the other players that the money is going towards. If he takes a discount, happy to have Sean Manaea back. Feels unlikely, though. Number 2, next player we don't think is going to return in 2025. This one's going to break your guys' hearts. I think people aren't ready to hear that this guy will not be back next year, but it's Jose Iglesias. I don't see a world where it makes sense for him to come back outside of vibes.
No, but maybe the vibes will do it enough. But there is a world where like maybe Jose Iglesias comes into the season as Joey Wendell. But bottom line is the Mets still have Jeff McNeil in the roster, and they're going to pay him a significant amount of money. They have Luis Angel Acuna, who stepped up, who's going to contribute to the Major League team at some point in 2025. Ryan Mauricio, whenever he gets back to baseball, will contribute to the 2025 team some point in time. Right there, I just gave you 3 other middle infielders who probably, this is going to sound weird to hear, because Jose Iglesias had the highest batting average in baseball last year of any player with 250 plate appearances. 3 guys who probably just have better offensive ceiling than Jose Iglesias, no matter what just happened in 2024. And the vibes are great. The defense is great. It's like a 35-year-old utility infielder. There's very little chance he comes back unless he just says, yeah, I'll take a prove it $1 million deal again, which feels disrespectful.
And I think there might be a team that might just give him a little bit more because he fits into that roster better. Like, why would another competing team who doesn't have the plethora of younger middle infield type players not give Jose Iglesias $4 or $5 million when the Mets can obviously afford that kind of contract, but is that the smartest thing to do when Jose Iglesias, for lack of a better term, as awesome as he was, it might not be really that sticky going into next year?
Not that sticky, but I think that there's a skill set that's real and that there's legitimate Jose Iglesias, because when you look for everything Jose Iglesias done over the last 5-ish years, he still always hangs out at least in 270, 280 batting average range. Like, he gets disrespected for it, but the fact that batting average got up to 340, that the on base percentage got up to 380, the slugging percentage got up to 450, that's a much better looking season than years before when he has an on base percentage that just sits around 300, and that's just probably more like the player he is. The defense is still good, but probably not a shortstop anymore. So it's just, he's in a weird situation this year, like he was last year, like he was the year before, where people don't believe in the skill set. The skill set's probably there, but it more comes back to the Mets are going to have a lot of other middle infielders that they probably want to give a look besides Jose Iglesias. Sadly.
A little peek behind the curtain for the boys who've worked for the Mets before. The OMG thing might keep him around, though.
It definitely might. There's a good chance that they literally give Jose Iglesias a Joey Wendell deal, 1 year for $3 million, just because they want to sell OMG stickers, signs, shirts, everything, sweatshirts. And there's a good chance that happens. But I think that this will be a cool barometer to how much marketing has influence on this roster again.
And I will say this: I'm happy to have him back again on a Joey Wendell contract, just like Sean Manaea.
Problem.
These guys, happy to run it back, but I just don't think it makes the most sense for necessarily either of these guys who might be able to get more money or better opportunities elsewhere.
better opportunity, more money. That's mostly Sean Manaea. Where Jose Iglesias,
Yeah.
I think he's going to get basically the same offer for a lot of places, just might get a better promise of playing time from other places, which could be hard for Jose Iglesias to swallow because he was like the linchpin of this team for this year. But what you do one year doesn't really have a huge indication of what you're going to do the next one.
Nope. Third player, a little bit different vibe here. JD Martinez. There's no shot he's coming back. I can't. If JD Martinez is back next year, something has gone catastrophically wrong.
I don't know about catastrophically wrong, but I think it was just like you shake JD Martinez's hand. It's like, just thank you for your service. Like, you helped change the vibe, change the tenor of this locker room. You really helped Mark Vientos seems like blossom into a good hitter. You gave us a couple of really good months of baseball. Kind of fell apart at the end. It does seem like this team, especially Carlos Mendoza, really, truly respects and admires JD Martinez
As
like
they
a lot. And I think that could be a little part of it, but I still just don't think there's any way he's back as a player. I don't even know who signs him as a player next year.
Yeah, I mean, he even kind of hinted at it towards the end of the year where they were like about coming back and whatnot. He's like, yeah, if somebody wants me, but I'm not going to force it. Like, I'm not going to, be looking like I have the last couple off seasons expecting to be getting paid. And again, when you look at his season, it was a tale of two halves. First half, he was phenomenal. 10 homers, 15 doubles, 260 average, 806 OPS. That's really good. That's all we could have ever asked for. In the second half, it was a nightmare. 199 average, 280 on base, 623 OPS. And I think that was probably the first official time that us as fans saw JD Martinez be old. And that's probably the first time in his career he went, oh shit. Like I'm not young. I'm 37 years old. This season is long. The season is not as easy as it's been in the past. And again, you're not really going to pay him unless he wants to hang around for $2-3 million and basically be a glorified hitting coach.
You didn't even pay him this year. He got what, $10 million? Like, it was another
12,
situation,
yeah.
12, where you had to wait until the end of March to even give him that contract. But it's just, there's probably just better other options for DH. Maybe not clog this roster up enough because you're going to have Starling Marte in this roster next year. Sorry, that's a big spoiler. Starling Marte is probably, it's really not going anywhere. So he might have to just DH a lot of the time because his legs don't work in the regular season.
Who's our Griffin Canning that we can trade Marte's contract for? Because the Angels took $28 million for Jorge Soler. Can we dump Starling Marte for just a pitcher that exists?
I think the only place would do is the Angels, but they just filled up their void of getting an expensive guy because they want to put some asses in the seats. So sadly, yeah. I think that we had to jump on that with the Angels. But I think even Marte is just significantly worse than Jorge Soler. So I think that's just never going to happen.
That's true. No, he is much worse. There's no way around that. All right, fourth player not returning. You just mentioned someone who could be maybe a different replacement for JD Martinez. It's going to be Jesse Winker. And I think the way we have to explain this to you guys is, again, I'd love Jesse Winker back on a cheap deal because he was awesome, and especially
1 for 10.
As a platoon DH who can play the outfield as well. It was bad outfield defense, but he's
good arm.
Yeah, good arm, and he moves way better than JD Martinez would. Like, he has that ability to still play the outfield. I just don't know what his market's going to look like because there's so many of Jesse Winker's kind of available in that he's a corner outfielder, DH, who has some pop in his bat. And I think as good as he was in the postseason, it kind of muddled a little bit how he really didn't hit that well in the second half with the Mets.
He didn't hit at all in September. I think he went 28 trade plate appearances without getting hit. He kind of rivaled JD Martinez there.
He does have a bad back.
Yeah, he did have a bad back. But I would take Jesse Winker back on the cheap deal. But just when you look at the Mets outfield alignment as it is right now, players currently on the roster, it will be Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Tyrone Taylor, who were the three outfielders for basically the entire offseason last year. And David Stearns took it upon himself with that trio of outfielders to go get someone who could play center fields in Harrison Bader, which is why I think that leaving Harrison Bader off this is. I think there's a better chance of Harrison Bader coming back to this team than Jesse Winker.
Ooh, really?
Because I think very literally when you had, again, these same three outfielders heading into last offseason, Marte, Nimmo, Taylor, you still want a center fielder to mix in, stir the drink. And I think a lot of Mets fans got to know Harrison Bader really well this year. You got to know exactly the player he is. You give him 400 plate appearances, he's not going to hit, and he will catch every single thing hit near him in center field. And there's a chance you do that again. You give him the same contract, maybe $1 million or $2 million less, because it's going to be the same thing as center fielders this offseason, where it's just Harrison Bader and Michael A. Taylor. Those are the only guys who can play a good defensive center field and actually hit a little bit. I mean, Kike Hernandez, we just saw what he did. I don't think what?
Does Grichuk play a good defensive center field still? Because he opted out of his contract with the Diamondbacks, and he definitely hits way better. There's no doubt.
He's a harsh, heavy platoon guy.
Yes, which I guess that doesn't really work with Tyrone then.
Yeah, he's 33. He's very hard to see.
He's 33 now?
Yeah, Grichuk is, yeah.
And Grichuk was taken with the pick ahead of Mike Trout?
Yeah, Grichuk didn't appear one inning in center field last year. But I think it's just because the Diamondbacks just had better center field options, but also he graded out negatively in the corner. So I guess he probably can't do center field anymore. He could probably do it as well, a little bit worse than Tyrone Taylor. But again, when you had these three outfielders on the roster heading into last year, David Stearns was like, I want a defensive center fielder to tie this whole thing together. It seems like that's just probably the path we go down again. Getting an elite defensive center fielder for cheap that will not block a young guy if a young guy makes himself unblockable.
Yeah, I was going to say we also have Drew Gilbert in the minors, who I know he didn't play a lot this past year, but at some point he's going to be up. And whether he's a center fielder or a corner guy, that's, I think, still up in the air a little bit.
I think he's going to be a center at least for a little while. But then the hope is also the guy like Jesse Winker. You probably get another corner outfielder who you think could hit a little better than him. I think the plan starts with a corner outfielder that's a better hitter than Jesse Winker, whose name also starts with a J.
Yeah, Juan Soto. If Juan Soto's here, Jesse Winker becomes a moot point. Yeah.
No, that's it. And the last guy, the fifth guy who we think probably will return to the Mets, also because we are expecting Juan Soto to be here, will likely be Pete Alonso.
Yeah.
And this echoes the point we said at the beginning. This isn't a list of guys we don't want returning to the Mets.
No.
This is guys we just don't think are likely to return to the Mets. The 5 least likely Mets from last year to return. And with Pete, it will just become an issue of money, where if you give Juan Soto $47-50 million a year, you just have to spend the budget elsewhere besides another power bat. You probably do. You probably need more pitching. You probably need more defense. You probably just need a little bit more fill in the cracks rather than get another big piece.
You know what's kind of funny is that if the Mets do sign Juan Soto, Jose Iglesias probably does come back. It's more
probably
likely
does come back.
Yeah.
The scales tip the other direction now. But I think it's going to be interesting the way this Pete contract situation comes out over the offseason, because last year a lot was made of the fact that he turned down the 7 years for $158 million. Supposed to come out to like 20, 23, 24 million a year.
I'll run the calculations real quick. Yeah.
And then all that did also was buy out what last year's contract was. And that was $20.5 million he made in arbitration.
22.5, by the way, $22.5 million.
Which I think is right between the Freddie Freeman AAV and the Matt Olson AAV.
So a really fair spot to be.
Really, really good offer they gave him with a ton of years, with a good amount of years on it. Take him until he's 36 years old. Because again, that 1 year would have also taken out last year, where he made 1 year, $20 million in arbitration. So he would have even gotten a few extra $1 million last year that he could have put on top of it with the 6-year guarantee afterwards. So really now we're comparing what Pete gets this year to a 6-year, $137.5 million deal. Which even again, if the Mets do sign Pete Alonso that contract, I say, you know what? I like that. Met for life. We got our guy back and I'm in. Once we get to the 7, 8, 9 million, 9-year ranges that some prognosticators for some reason are putting on again, I think Jim Ballard had him for an 8-year deal. That's where it starts to get a little fuzzy for me, especially if you have Juan Soto. I'll be sad for like an hour about Pete Alonso leaving. Probably a little more. I'll probably be sad for a week.
We'll have a drink, yeah.
Yeah, I'll be upset about it, but I won't be like kicking and screaming if the Mets have Juan Soto and Pete Alonso takes a 7-year deal elsewhere.
Oh yeah, if they have Juan Soto, honestly, I'll wish the best for Pete. I'll be like, dude, thank you. You're one of my favorite Mets that we've ever had. We've got Juan Soto now. Yeah. That's the classic looking back at the ex-girlfriend thing. That's like I'll miss you, but the new one's pretty great. With Pete, the thing is Juan Soto. It starts and ends with Juan Soto, and you can't really think about this offseason. We've said it on episodes and people get mad how much we are in on Juan Soto and really don't care about anything else.
Don't care.
But all this guy does is win. All he does is mash. And until we know where he is, who he's playing for next year, it's hard to even imagine a Pete Alonso contract being talked about.
Any of these contracts really being talked about until Juan Soto signs anywhere. Like just similar to Ohtani last offseason, Juan Soto will be the first domino to fall because he's such a big fucking domino. All 3 teams Juan Soto's played on his career, all 3 of them went further with Juan Soto on their team than they did in the previous decade without Juan Soto on their team. Nationals won the World Series and he was a rookie. The Padres went to the NLCS with him in the 1 year they had, the one playoff run they had. Did they get another playoff run? No, the one playoff run they had Juan Soto, they went to the NLCS. And the Yankees this year went to their first World Series in 15 seasons because of Juan Soto being on their team. Basically, just barely a playoff team without him. So Juan Soto changes your franchise. You, me, everyone listening, none of our lives are the same after Juan Soto is a New York Met. Everything will change in that instance. It doesn't matter. Blank check, give him anything he wants. Players like that don't shake free often. The ripple effect, though, is that it'll probably make sure that Pete Alonso is no longer a Met.
Yeah,
that's just it.
Pete's got the Scott Boras factor, too. Like, Pete might just ask for an insane amount of money. Like you said, Jim Bowden's thrown out 8 years. Don't think that's not Scott Boras pushing a little bit of his agenda, too, out there to the media.
If you right now had to give me a definitive answer, do you think Pete Alonso signs a contract for over under 6.5 years?
Under.
Okay, so under. So that means I even think with Soto that could still put Pete in play. I think it'd be crazy. I think it would take Steve Cohen being like a big grown man, but I think if anything comes in for Pete, that's 6 years or under. I think no matter what else happens, he actually is still in play for the Mets.
I think there's a super realistic world where Pete signs the Cody Bellinger, Matt Chapman contracts, Blake Snell.
1-2
Yeah,
opt-outs,
where it's a 3-year deal worth whatever number he wants that he says he claims he wants, like 3 for 100. Let's just pretend that's the crazy number.
Sets the AAV all-time mark for first baseman. I guess in the modern era, he'll never beat like the Pujols deals from way back when. Yeah, but like the guys currently have the highest AAV for a current first baseman in the league. But then try and do it again after like one more year where he's still good. But then he has the 30-year-old stink on him now.
I know.
I don't know. Maybe this is just the chance where he's like, even if I get the 6, even if it's a lower AAV, which is the exact contract the Mets gave him, that 6 for 138 feels so close to what this winds up being to me. I think it's so funny.
That feels like a good number.
It's a really good tip the cap to our front office and how good of a deal, how fair and honest of a deal they offered them last offseason, which is, again, good hats off there to everybody. But at least without that, we're still as in play for Juan as anybody else in baseball. And that's exactly where we want to be.
And of course, we told you guys we'd have some honorable mentions too. A couple crazy names are going to be on here. But you know what, James? It was my take originally, but I'm going to let you have it now. Who's your crazy honorable mention here?
My crazy honorable mention is Edwin Diaz. And this is just something weird I feel in my plums where I can't shake the thought of David Stearns looking at this balance sheet and thinking that there's one really, really bloated player and a guy that probably made back a lot of his trade value this year. A lot of Mets fans might not think so because the blown saves were bad, but the strikeout rate, all the pitches, everything came back
front
to the spot.
Offices, the things that they care about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every other team in baseball still thinks Edwin Diaz is one of the better closers in baseball. Clearly a top 5, worst case, top 7 kind of guy of all relievers in the league. And then you look back at the types of teams, the way the rosters are built that win World Series. The Braves in 2021 are the only team in the last 5 years to win a World Series with a relief pitcher making more than $10 million. And that was Will Smith, who made 13, which was insane. And then even going past that, you have to go all the way back to the 2018 Red Sox to have another team with a reliever that made more than $10 million in the roster. That was Craig Kimbrell, who's one of the best closers of all time, despite what people think of him now. And that was $13 million in 2018. So to see a $20 million reliever, I know baseball's changed a lot, but now in the last CBA, these contracts almost get a little bit more serious because of how close you get to these luxury tax thresholds and how important it is to how much these teams care about going over those lines because of how much you have to pay in fees and how much your draft pick goes back and the penalties that are associated with them. I think if David Stearns gets creative and there's a way to acquire other talented relievers, because other talented relievers will be available, not the ones you're going to have to buy in free agency. There's no way the Mets sign Tanner Scott $15 million a year, but creating new relievers out in there, getting guys like Ryan Helsley who are on expiring deals with teams that don't really want to pay anybody anymore, like the Cardinals. Dave Bednar got with the Pirates, who it's the team that just doesn't like paying people. There's always going to be options for buying low or just buying mid on relievers who can pay nothing to. Devin Williams, another great one to get for a 1-year rental. But I think the more David Stearns looked at this balance sheet, there's one area that he wish he had more budget to spread around in rather than concentrate on one player. And I think that player always comes back to Edwin Diaz. Not a situation where I think he's not going to be on the team next year. Not a situation where I don't exactly want him to be on the team next year. But I think if there's a creative way to get Edwin Diaz off the team this year and get even some kind of asset back, I think David Stearns explores that option.
Yeah, I mean, he's owed $21.5 million next year. He has a team option for the final year of his contract, but conservatively speaking, Edwin Diaz is due about $60 million from the Mets over the next 3 years. So $60 million is going to sound crazy, but I'm going to put it to you this way, Mets fans. Would you rather spend that $60 million on Pete Alonso, or would you rather spend that $60 million on Edwin Diaz? Like,
I'll even say this. Would you rather spend that money on Edwin Diaz or Sean Manaea?
Probably Sean Manaea. Not probably. Definitely Sean Manaea.
And 100% Sean Manaea. And I think that's this.
We don't think this is going to happen. That's why it's not on here. But this is just a little thought process, a little food for thought there about where our head's at and where David Stearns' head could be at. Because he's a smart dude, and we know that he's definitely thinking of every single option to make this team better.
Totally, there's a million options, and there was a great post that Mike Janela made a TikTok of his interview he did with David Stearns. When David Stearns became the president last offseason, where Stearns talked about wrestling with the fan in his brain and the executive in his brain, and being like, the fan in me is probably gonna get really mad at the executive in me many times when this happens. This could be like one of those moves where, as an executive, this feels like the shrewd, cunning way to make this team get more flexible and be able to spend more money in more valuable spots on the fly, while also being like, damn, that would be sad to see. Because another part of this is 2 other guys I'm sure that David Stearns would love to not have on this team next year, but will be on this team. Contracts he didn't sign are Jeff McNeil and Starling Marte. I think that these guys will definitely be back next year, and I apologize for telling you guys this, but I think there's almost no way either of those players are off this roster on opening day just because of where their contracts are at and where their relative value is to everybody else in the league. I think Mets fans and baseball fans alike will always do this thing where they're like, this guy will be traded by the offseason, like this offseason. I'll always respond to them. Who's taking him to trade? What are you getting back? People are like, we're going to trade Jeff McNeil. Who's trading for Jeff McNeil? What do you get back for Jeff McNeil? People are like a bag of balls. So they're taking his salary. Are you paying his salary? You're going to pay him to play against you? It doesn't make sense either. It's just these guys, the contracts are a little too bloated for them to go anywhere this offseason.
Yeah, I know.
Unless you attach prospects, which I don't want to do.
Which is funny because you want Glaber at $20 million for 1 year, but Jeff's making 15 next year, and you think it's too much.
But I'm saying I think they're. I mean, I want chess pieces to move around. I do think Glaber is a better offensive player than Jeff. The way you hate Glaber Torres doesn't make any sense. He's a very consistent baseball player. This is the problem when like you make content for too many years and you have to hold yourself to takes you had for years when there's tons of data that tells you otherwise about a guy like Glaber Torres. Where the Yankees are going to offer him the qualifying deal. I'm just going to do one second on Glaber Torres. If you offer him $1 more than the qualifying offer, if he gets qualifying offer, then never mind because I'm not giving a pick for Glaber Torres. 0% chance on that. But it's going to be like Severino, who's the next guy I want to talk about in this list, who I think is shockingly likely to come back to this team.
Me too, yeah.
Because I don't think that Glaber Torres...
Glaber lives in your head.
Got Yankees on the brain. I don't think that Luis Severino pitched well enough this year, despite him pitching well, to warrant like a big deal. Like Manaea pitched himself into a new echelon of pitcher.
Yes.
3-year, 4-year deal, could approach $100 million, at least approaching $75 million. Luis Severino didn't do that. Luis Severino didn't strike out as many guys as he could have. He walked kind of a little more guys than he expected. The volume was great, but he never really zapped back into being anything close to Luis Severino of old, which was never necessarily expected, but I don't see any way where Severino gets more than like a 2 for $35 million a year deal. So if that's all the same, probably just wants to keep living in New York.
Yeah, Severino's season's so weird because first half was more consistent, but he didn't strike out as many guys. His stuff wasn't as good. Second half was less consistent, but he had way more strikeouts in way less innings. So it's, again, another tale of two stories for Luis Severino of like, what version are you getting? And I still think the jury's out, which is why he's probably more likely to come back as a New York Met.
But the bottom line is that there's a range of outcomes for Severino. That's a guy who's between a 4.2 and like a 3.8 ERA.
Yes.
And that guy is going to get, I don't know, again, like $15 to $18 million, 2-year contract on that. It's a little bit less than we gave Jose Quintana 2 years ago, which is another guy not on this list. Because in a similar way as Severino, he's another guy I see a good chance that comes back because I don't think anyone in the league is offering Jose Quintana more than a 1-year deal for more than $14, $15 million. And if you get the same offer from everyone, you just had success here. This is a great clubhouse. You trust everybody in the building, and you just don't want to move. Moving sucks for people in their 20s in New York and then professional athletes moving across the country. No matter who you are, how much money you have, moving fucking sucks. You don't want to do it if you don't have to do it. So, and the Mets just have a lot of pitchers a lot of innings they need to recoup for next year. So I think there's just a good chance that they stay in the bargain bin with Severino, Quintana, and maybe spend the money on elsewhere, another couple of guys.
Yeah. And that's it. That's what we got for you. Those are our 5 players we think are most likely to not return for the 2025 season. Appreciate all you listening to the podcast. Appreciate you watching it over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the Mets'd podcast channel over there. Drop a like on the video. Leave some comments. The comment section has been going crazy these last few
comment
episodes.
section's been hot. Tell us how stupid we are. Tell us how mad you are at us.
Yeah, because I know a lot of Mets fans finding us and they're like, these guys, they don't want to just bring all the same players back and do it again.
But this is fun because we haven't really been able to do off-season content in a while. And the last time we even did do off-season content, there was a fucking strike. So we actually haven't done a real year of off-season content with this podcast. So this is actually kind of fun for us.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically the last time we did do off-season content, we were signed by the New York Mets. So
yeah,
pretty good stock right there.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes on again.
But thank you guys for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.
Peace out. See you guys next time. Let's go Mets.